Antonio Pigafetta, born sometime in the closing year of the 15th century. Parents Giovanni Pigafetta and Angela Zoga, the eldest child among his siblings of two, was a native of Vicenza, a town about 100 kilometers west of Venice, Italy. Studied astronomy, geography, and cartography. Francisco Albo was a navigator in bosun and Ferdinand Magellan's expedition. He was initially the bosun of the Trinidad. After him, he was the pilot of the Victoria under the command of Sebastian de Elcano.
Reasons in writing the primary sources. Antonio Pigafetta's account of the first voyage around the world, often referred to his account of the first voyage around the world, was written for several important reasons. Most significantly, it was intended right down to the record of navigation that had accomplished the first circumnavigation of the globe, first by Ferdinand Magellan and afterward by Juan Sebastian Elcano. Following Magellan's death, his careful account provided a generalized record of the events, making this worthwhile historical text from pioneering nautical event. At the same time, Pigafetta struggled to include his personal contribution to the event, and the account allowed him to detail all of his observation and the problems involved in the voyage. The chronicle also added much scientific geographical information, detailed description of newly encountered lands, peoples, and cultures, which increased European knowledge of global geography and ethnography. In addition, Pigafetta's account was to report back to the Spanish crown and other patrons that the voyage had been completed successfully in more than considerable ways. This will be extreme importance for the future sponsorship. His observations are valuable proof to the great help in confirming and complementing other narratives of this voyage, thus rendering a more comprehensive account from history.
Highlights of the contents. Accounts of the first circumnavigation of the globe 1519 to 1522. Antonio Pigafetta narrative represents, in all respects, a well-documented account of the expedition that started in 1519 and lasted until 1522. It gives an account of major happenings during the journey, with vital navigational details, including everyday events on board among members of the crew. He also narrated the new lands and regions that were discovered, the Strait of Magellan, the Pacific Ocean, and the Spice Island. He also provides detailed description of native peoples, their costumes, ways of life, and how they treated or came into contact with the European explorers. Francisco Albo's logbook of Ferdinand Magellan is historical documented of the prime need, for it has left behind detailed account of the voyage made by Ferdinand Magellan. It takes note of the position of the ship, the routes, and the navigational difficulties beside recording the first circumnavigation of the globe. Albo's observation on the land and sea routes through which he traveled add to the early knowledge of European global geography. The log is thus an important document for cross-referencing with other accounts and provide a personal opinion on the experiences on men on the crew.
On March 16, 1521, Ferdinand Magellan discovered Homonhon Samar. March 17, 1521, Magellan decided to land to get water and rest. March 18, 1521, Magellan had an encounter with Zulus. March 22, Zulus people returned as they had promised in two boats with resources. March 29, Magellan wanted to be Kasi or bother with a king. And March 31, the first Catholic Mass in the country, the cross was also set on the highest mountain. So this is the first Catholic Mass in the country. So now let's proceed to the biases.
Biases. There are some biases typical of most European accounts of exploration in the 16th century. First, this work reflects a Eurocentric perspective, often portraying the indigenous peoples encountered during the voyage, including the Philippines, as exotic or other, with European costumes and beliefs implicitly or explicitly presented as superior. The accounts by Pigafetta are also prejudicial to Magellan and the Crown of Spain, portraying their mission of exploration and conservation as a just and noble cause, while at the times downplaying the negative effects of colonization on the indigenous peoples. Furthermore, Pigafetta himself, being a dedicated member of the expedition, could have exaggerated some events, for example, the heroism of Magellan, to give more dramatic effect to the narrative. There are also biases in logbook of Francisco Albo, especially in the manner by which it narrates the experience of Filipino overseas workers. The story most probably bends towards the Filipino protagonist, Francisco Albo, focusing on his sufferings and injustices in a foreign land. It can be underpinning the problems and discrimination Filipino workers had to go through and maybe place foreign powers or employers in bad light. There can also be an anti-colonial tone to the book since it was during the period when the Philippines was under American control. This could take the form of a critique of colonialism and its effects on Filipino identity and labor. In addition, the narrative may idolize Filipino cultures as upright and superior to all other cultures Francisco comes across. These biases speak to tensions between the colonialized and the colonizers and personal and collective struggles of Filipinos.
So the main argument of the first voyage around the world is for Antonio Pigafetta's point of view that the text greatly argues about the documentation of this never done before journey across the globe, underscoring its enormousness and diversity coupled with hardship and encounters with different peoples, notably in the Philippines. So the work is important because it goes into detail regarding the different lands and cultures that were encountered. It serves as a record of European exploration and how it shaped world history. And for Franciscus Balos' point of view that the logbook is a work focusing on the struggles and experiences of Filipino seamen and laborers who migrated to other countries in the early 20th century. The general argument posed in this book lies in the complex issues of Filipino identity in other country wherein it follows the hero Francisco Ballo and his struggle to keep up with the hardship of working in a strange country while adhering to his own roots and culture. So the story is often looked at as a commentary on colonialism, migration, and how global labor movements have affected the Filipino psyche through Francisco's experiences. So it discusses displacement, adoption, resistance, and insight into the bigger social, historical context of Filipino labor migration during that time.
Importance of understanding in Philippine history. Elaborated the lifestyle back then, and it described what the local islanders wore, what they ate, how they communicated, and how they lived. Pigafetta's journal is the only known document about Lapu-Lapu's life, and considered the best source today of the customs and usage of the Filipinos in the early 16th century due to daily notes Pigafetta took and details about the expedition that he wrote about. It contains the first vocabulary of Visayan words ever penned by a European, and it helped us knowing how the early Filipinos lived by the account of primary source who witnessed in first hand. Pigafetta's journal is also a vital piece not only of Philippine history, but also of our world history. He narrated events that transpired in a way that gave the readers of his journal a clear picture of what it was like to be a part of the first voyage around the world.